Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Fantasy Football Actuary Podcast. I am your host, Brock Talby, the Fantasy Football Actuary. As we do with our usual Tuesday episodes, our first segment here will be Congratulate or Commiserate. If you're new to the podcast, this is where I talk about how I did in my three main leagues. And then we go to a listener who wrote in to hear about how they did, and we can either congratulate each other or maybe we can commiserate together. And you listening at home, if you won, you can be congratulated as well. Good work. Or if you lost and you're a little bitter about it, at least this will give you some good feelings that hey, other people lost too, and you can commiserate together. So for me, first off, I went 1-2 in my leagues. We will start with my 10 team standard league. I crushed it. I was the second highest point scorer and I doubled up my opponent. He had a really bad week. He started Devonta Freeman, Jerick McKinnon. So he basically got 0 points from his starting running backs. Just not a good week for him. But I was second high point scorer. Thank you, A.J. Brown and Antonio Gibson. So those were the guys that led me to victory this week. And here's the real annoying league, my 12 team Superflex league. I am the second highest point scorer on the season by like 100 points. I've been just putting up a lot of numbers, but I'm only 2-5 in my record. The only two wins that I have are weeks where I was the high point scorer. The other weeks, I've been in like the top four scorers every time, but I keep losing because people keep having just fantastic weeks against me. So it's been rough. It's a little depressing being the second highest point scorer and then sitting in eighth place at 2-5. Luckily, we do adjust the rankings at the end before we go into the playoffs. So we get a point each week for winning your matchup, and you get a point for being in the top half of scoring. So I'm technically 500 right now. I think I'm a fringe playoff team. Hopefully, it kind of evens out, and my high point scoring will actually get me some victories here. But I know that this happens every year. This happens to people. So if you're out there and you're the second or first highest point scorer in your league and it hasn't turned into wins yet, hopefully it will even out over the back half of the season here, just like I'm hoping it will for me. And then my Dynasty League, I lost. I was playing the first place team, so I wasn't too hopeful playing, but he was down Aaron Jones. So if this was the week that I was going to take him out, it was a good matchup week for me. Well, theoretically, I ended up playing Cam, Chase Claypool, and Darren Fells. So all three of those guys combined for 0 points. And even though he was without Aaron Jones and he had a couple scrubs in because of that, I could not come away with a victory. Getting 0 points combined from three of your players is not going to result in wins that often. So that was a downer for me. But 1-2, at least I got one win, so it wasn't an 0-3 week. We will go to a listener who wrote in, Trayton. He said that he had a tough matchup for Derrick Henry. Yes, Derrick Henry is playing Pittsburgh. That is indeed a tough matchup. So that led to lower than usual output, and Kyler connecting to his opponent's Christian Kirk for 2 touchdowns on Sunday Night Football slapped him with his first loss since week 1. And then he puts at the end here, oh yeah, it was against the lowest scoring team up to this point in the season. That's rough. So it looks like you have an easy win, a bye week maybe. You're thinking, oh, I'm against this last place team. He hasn't put up any points. And then Christian Kirk comes away with 2 touchdowns in Sunday Night Football, duplicating the 2 touchdowns he had last week. And you're just kind of screwed. So at least you're doing well. At least you were in first place before this week. Hopefully you're still in first place after this week. And you can bounce back next week and get back to your winning ways. So we will go next into our high flying and nose diving section. This is where I talk about a quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end who I think is high flying after this week, who I think is on the uptrend, and then someone who I think is nose diving, who's kind of on the decline, who you may want to be careful for going forward. So my high flying quarterback is Justin Herbert. I've highlighted him a few times on the podcast, but more of a streamer situation. But this week, Herbert has reached full-on every week starter status after ending as the QB1. So he was the QB1 this week. Yes, it was Jacksonville, but he did light up New Orleans and Tampa Bay before the Chargers bye last week. And he's thrown for 10 touchdowns in the last 3 games, and I don't see it slowing down. His next 4 games are Denver, Las Vegas, Miami, and the Jets. So keep firing up Justin Herbert. He is an every week start, and he is just pouring points onto the scoreboard. So if you're a fantasy manager that has Justin Herbert, you are extremely happy right now. My nose diving quarterback is Cam Newton. It really couldn't be anyone else. When you score negative points as a quarterback, you had a historically bad day. And I had to put him here because I actually played Cam Newton. So I was one of the victims of his just terrible day. He had 98 passing yards, I believe, and 3 interceptions. He ended up getting benched in the fourth quarter. Belichick has come out and said that he is their starter still going forward. But you have to imagine it's a short leash, just so they can see what they have in Stidham. Because Cam is only on a 1 year deal. If they start losing more games, maybe Bill wants to see what Stidham can do before going into the draft next year and potentially drafting a quarterback. Cam was a stud a few weeks ago, but his last 3 games have been really rough. Last week he saved it kind of he had 76 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown, which should give Cam a safe floor, but there was no rushing base this week. So without that, he's just kind of useless, and you saw it lead to negative points. He's thrown just 2 touchdowns all year and 7 interceptions now, including 3 this past week. I don't put it all on Cam. His supporting cast is really bad. Edelman's leading the league in drops, and balls slipping through his hand have been the reason for a couple of these interceptions from Cam. So the offense just isn't good. Cam has no help. And if he loses the rushing base, which has given him 5 rushing touchdowns in 5 games, he'll start becoming useless for fantasy. So you need those rushing touchdowns to come back. You need that rushing base to come back, the 50 to 70 yards a game, because their offense just isn't good enough to support him as a passer. My high flying running back is Chase Edmonds. Kenyon Drake was back to being just awful again on Sunday Night Football, and then he left with an ankle injury that is said to be a partially torn ligament, and it will cost him a couple of weeks. So Edmonds has been the more explosive back all season. I expect him to be a stud in Drake's absence, and he might not give the starting job back to Drake when he's back from injury. I don't know how you look at these games and see Chase Edmonds being such a stud and being so much more explosive than Drake, and then have Drake come back and take the lead back role again. Edmonds' receiving work has kept him in flex consideration all season, but he's a high-end running back 2 now as the lead dog in Arizona. My nose diving running back is Ezekiel Elliott. So Dallas has been a dumpster fire all season, and it's kind of turned into a full-on inferno right now. Elliott had 2 fumbles last week, and he lost another one this week that luckily got recovered by Dallas, so you did not get penalized with a -2 if you're an Elliott fantasy owner. But he's not gotten a lot of help outside of that, as the offensive line's just been atrocious, and they've been plagued with more injuries as the season has gone on. If Andy Dalton misses time from that terrible headshot that he took, the offense will be even worse, and defenses will only need to focus on the run to make this offense completely inept. So you aren't benching Zeke by any means, but he's not currently a top 5 back that you probably drafted him as, and he may not even be inside the top 10 right now. I'm kind of viewing him as a low-end RB1, which is not what you want to see when you draft a top 3 guy. And I think he'll be hard-pressed to put up any superstar weeks with that offensive line and games against Philly and Pittsburgh coming up before a bye week. So you have to keep starting him. I actually did just trade for Zeke. The Zeke owner was really frustrated on Sunday after the last couple of games. He said that Zeke was on the block. I messaged him. We had a couple of back and forths. I ended up trading Deontay Johnson and Antonio Gibson for Ezekiel Elliott. Antonio Gibson was my 3rd running back. Deontay Johnson was probably my 3rd wide receiver on the team. So tweet at me and let me know if I won that trade or if I lost it. I was a little hesitant actually to take it because Antonio Gibson looked so good, but I did end up taking it just for Zeke's upside. We'll see how it works. My high-flying wide receiver is Christian Kirk. He has 2 touchdowns in each of the last 2 weeks, and he's gone over 75 yards in 2 of the last 3. It looks like he's the receiver to own behind DeAndre Hopkins, and with the Cardinals offense cooking and Kyler Murray looking like a superstar this season, Kirk has sustained flex value any given week with the upside to grab a couple of touchdowns like he's done the last 2 weeks. So, yeah, Trayton, I'm sorry. Christian Kirk, he's my high flying wide receiver. He did you in on Sunday Night Football. He's got touchdown upside every single week, though. My nose diving wide receiver is Chase Claypool. So it's hard to put a guy here who's been so good 2 out of the last 3 weeks. And he's a rookie, so you're going to have ups and downs. But Claypool completely disappeared this week with Deontay Johnson back in the lineup. It is worth noting that Tennessee did dedicate their top coverage to Claypool rather than Deontay Johnson. So Big Ben took the easier path by throwing to Deontay, who had a ridiculous 15 targets. This game makes me very hesitant to play Claypool with all the other receivers healthy. Johnson, however, did appear to get hurt near the end of the game, so it might be Claypool time again next week. If Deontay is back in, though, I don't think we see the full Mapletron experience unless he gets a long bomb touchdown on his limited targets. I expect limited targets. If Deontay and James Washington and Juju, if everyone's healthy, all 4 of them, including Claypool, I think he's going to get limited target work. I don't think you're going to see Mapletron like you did the last couple of weeks without Deontay. It's still worth... I still will say that Chase Claypool is a great flyer if you need a flex play because he can catch that long bomb touchdown, or he could have a multi-touchdown game any given week because of how good he is. But I don't expect his crazy amount of targets to continue if Deontay Johnson's healthy. My high-flying tight end is Rob Gronkowski. I talked about him last week as a decent bye week fill-in, but I said that his floor was essentially 0 with so many weapons in Tampa. But Brady and Gronk have a history that may make him a little safer now than what we saw the first few weeks. It looks like Gronk's getting back into the groove of professional football to me. He just looks better. The first 3 weeks, he had like 11 receiving yards and a couple catches or something. And that's why I said that his floor is 0, especially with Evans and Godwin and Bray and Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette coming back, all the weapons. And now they're signing Antonio Brown. So Antonio Brown is coming, but I think that hurts Mike Evans a lot more than it hurts Gronk. With Brady's chemistry and Gronk's improving NFL game shape, I think he's a solid option that may still be available on your waiver wire. He's 90% owned at ESPN. I did pick him up last week to play him while Mark Andrews was on bye. So he was still available then. I'm keeping him on my roster. I'm not dropping him. Because he has had 8 targets of each of the last 2 games and a touchdown. So that kind of volume at tight end is hard to come by. I'm going to keep him on my bench as a stash. He's not a bad option, though, to play. If you didn't have a superstar tight end like Mark Andrews, like I have, which I have to play Mark Andrews every week, I think, I would strongly consider Rob Gronkowski as a good start on any given week. So my nose diving tight end is Jonnu Smith. In a game where the Titans were coming from behind and Tannehill was throwing a lot. In a game where Corey Davis received 10 targets and A.J. Brown went for 153 receiving yards, Jonnu Smith went 1 for 9 on only 4 targets. So it was a rough outing. After he left last week's game early with an injury, I have no idea if the injury was lingering, which slowed him down, prevented him from being able to get open. I really don't know. But with A.J. Brown and Corey Davis now healthy, I'm worried that Jonnu isn't going to see the same amount of targets and touchdown opportunities that we saw in the first few weeks. When Tennessee was only working with either Davis or Brown, Jonnu was very viable. It remains to be seen how viable he is with both Corey Davis and A.J. Brown back in the lineups together. So we'll have to wait and see. I don't think his upside is as high as it appeared early on in the season, though. And that will conclude the high flying and nose diving section. We will get into the straight fire from the waiver wire. My top target at running back this week is Carlos Hyde. I will get it out of the way right now. I think the waiver wire is very thin this week. I am not looking to spend that much fab at all. I'm not looking to blow any waiver priorities. I don't think there's anyone worth blowing the waiver priority or anything over 10% fab on this week. So, yes, I have my favorite targets, but it could just as well be any of the guys I mentioned in the other section, or this guy could end up being useless. So do not spend a ton of fab on any of these guys. But these are my favorite guys for the week. Carlos Hyde at running back. Chris Carson left with a mid-foot sprain, and he's week to week. Hyde is dealing with some hamstring tightness right now. So if you look at on ESPN, he has a little Q next to his name. I don't think it's anything to worry about, and barring any practice injury, I think Hyde will be good to go. And you might get a couple of weeks of RB2 value out of him if Chris Carson does not recover quickly. I would only spend, like I said, around 10% of my fab on him. Maybe a little bit higher if I was super RB needy in the next couple of weeks and I had a lot of buys and I need a solid start for 1 or 2 weeks. Maybe go over a little over 10%, but I would not recommend it. Other running backs to consider: JaMychal Hasty from San Francisco. We saw Jeff Wilson Jr. just tear it up. He had 3 touchdowns this past week for San Francisco, and then he left the game with a high ankle sprain. San Francisco just can't keep any running backs healthy. With Raheem Mostert on IR and Tevin Coleman still injured, Jerick McKinnon's still there, but he got 1 carry for like -1 yards or something this past week. So I assume it'll be Jerick McKinnon leading the way, but JaMychal Hasty is actually very interesting. And then Wayne Gallman for the Giants. Devontae Freeman left with an ankle injury in the 4th quarter on Thursday Night Football. I have not seen any updates on him. If he misses, Wayne Gallman is the starter there. So, yeah, you can consider him if you want. My top wide receiver to grab is Brandon Ayuk. Deebo Samuel pulled a hammy this past week, and he'll probably miss 2 weeks or so. Ayuk has been a great player for the 49ers so far his rookie year. He's got 2 rushing touchdowns, just like Chase Claypool. He's got a couple receiving touchdowns, and he just broke 100 receiving yards this past week for the first time. With Deebo out and a matchup with the porous Seattle defense up next, I like Ayuk a lot for the next couple of weeks. I would spend only 5% of my fab on him, though, because Deebo will come back in a week or two, and then it will be Ayuk and Deebo, with Deebo being the number 1, Ayuk being the number 2. Other wide receivers to consider: the Cleveland wide receivers are probably a really hot topic this week after Odell tore his ACL. You can pick one if you want, but I wouldn't overpay for them. If I had to choose, I would choose Rashard Higgins, just based on his rookie year chemistry with Baker Mayfield. He did look pretty good. They came in as rookies together, and then the Browns signed Odell, and he kind of got pushed off to the side. With Odell out of the way, I think he's the guy that you would want. Yeah, but don't overpay for him, because I have no idea how that's going to pan out, and I don't think anybody does. Nelson Aguilar, he looks like Derek Carr's most reliable weapon for consistency. I'm sure Henry Ruggs will have more explosive games, but I think Aguilar is developing chemistry with Carr, and I think he's going to be a consistent, steady contributor any given week. Sterling Shepard was a late add from IR for the Giants, and he came back his first game last Thursday with 59 yards and a touchdown. So you could do worse than Sterling Shepard. Because he was on IR so long and injured, he might be available on waivers this week. My top tight end, again, just like last week, is Trey Burton. I said he was my favorite last week before the bye, and nothing has changed. He's only 10% owned in ESPN. He plays in a tight end heavy offense with a tight end loving QB. He got a rushing touchdown last week, or the week before the bye, rather. So Trey Burton, if he's out there, which he probably is, only 10% owned, I think he's a great pickup. I think he can be a low-end tight end 1 the rest of the season, as long as he retains the top tight end job in Indy, which he should, because he's the best tight end on the roster. Other tight ends to consider: basically nobody. If you can't get Burton and you need to start, just pick somebody and hope for a touchdown, basically. You could give Richard Rodgers a shot from Philly, or the rookie Harrison Bryant from Cleveland. He caught 2 touchdowns this past week, so if you want to do a little touchdown chasing, you could go for him. Hopefully it doesn't come to that for your teams, and you can at least either get Trey Burton, or you already have a decent tight end option on your roster. We will finish it up here with my favorite quarterback streamers for the week. Last week I highlighted Carson Wentz as my favorite streamer, and he turned out really nicely. He didn't look that good as a real-life quarterback, but his fantasy numbers were really good against the Giants. This week, I'm going back to the well with someone who might not look really good as an NFL quarterback, but he has a really good matchup. Baker Mayfield is playing the Las Vegas Raiders, so he's probably widely available. He hasn't been super good this year, He had a really good game last week against a bad Cincy defense. Now he's playing a bad Las Vegas defense. So I think he's my favorite streamer this week. The only other consideration that I could find with a good matchup and low ownage percentage would be Jared Goff. He gets to play Miami. Miami is coming off the bye though, and they are 3-3. So it's not the best matchup, but I think it's a solid enough matchup that you could stream Jared Goff. And that will end the Tuesday episode. I will have week 8 modeled rankings on the website for free on Thursday, just like always. You can check those out at thefantasyfootballactuary.com. I have non-PPR, half PPR, PPR, flex rankings, defense rankings, all kinds of stuff. It should help you set your sit start or help make your start sit decisions. And those get updated throughout the week all the way up until the Sunday kickoff. I keep updating my models to get updated modeled rankings for you. If you want to watch a YouTube or if you want to watch a video version of this podcast, you can check the YouTube channel. It's The Fantasy Football Actuary. And if you want to follow me on social media, my Twitter and Instagram handle are the same. It is at the FF Actuary. So that will conclude the Tuesday episode. Hopefully you had a good week. Hopefully you're going into week 8 feeling really good. And until next time, keep crunching those numbers.